Hi guys, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool, great. Okay. Let me know when you guys are good to start. I can see people are joining, so
We can,
probably
so
give
we
it a
can
few
wait
more
for like
minutes.
2 more minutes. Yes. And allow more to join. Like,
Okay. Shall we make a start?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's go for it. All right, guys, thanks for joining. I know it's
okay, like we can start with the introduction.
So we can start with your introduction.
yeah, that's fine, guys. Let me just bring up the slides that I have, and that will cover your introductions and other questions you might have. So let me share my screen. Hang on.
Okay, sir.
Give me 1 sec. Sorry. Hang on. This Google Chrome is not doing the job. Hang on. Something problem went wrong. Guys, my screen sharing is not working. Just give me 1 sec. I'll dial in from another laptop, and that should work. Just bear with me.
Sure, sir.
I think if someone has some questions regarding the session, then they can drop the questions in the chat box, I guess. Like, it would be better. Like, we can read those out to Mr. Banerjee. Or is it? Yes.
Yeah, guys, if anyone has any questions regarding the session or regarding any doubts related to consulting and what actually it is, you guys can drop it in the chat box, and our panelist will address them.
Can you see my screen, guys? Or is it not visible?
Sir, it's not visible.
No, sir, it's not visible.
Okay, let me give it another go. Sorry.
It's visible
about now?
now, and we're good to go.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, if I lose the connection again, guys, on thing, Tuhin, I'll just email it to you and you can share the screen after that.
Okay, sir.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, thanks. I'll keep the introduction super short because most of you probably have seen my LinkedIn. But thanks, guys, for having me. I'm Sinchan. I'm a director in KPMG UK. I focus on our capital markets consulting business, and I've been doing this for close to 15 years now, basically. I, of course, am an alumnus of JU. I finished in 2005. I did mine in instrumentation and electronics, worked for a few years, then did my MBA. And I actually moved to consulting after my MBA through Deloitte and currently in KPMG. But prior to that, I started my career with Infosys, got hired from the campus, lots of good memories in the Mysore campus with friends and all. So I spent a couple of years there, moved to Morgan Stanley to really build my financial services investment banking knowledge, and then MBA and consulting is how my career went. I have a heavy focus on risk and regulatory side of the business, but you can ignore that for this particular discussion. It doesn't really matter. And I have lived and worked across the world pretty much, fortunate enough in that way, so I can share some of those perspectives as well. So I guess, guys, a couple of things I thought might be helpful to you, and very open to keep this interactive and take your questions. I can't see the questions though on the screen, so someone has to read them out to me. So one is getting you an introduction to consulting is what the hell is this beast basically? What does it mean? What do you do? What are the types of consulting? How do you get into it? What do you need to focus in your uni to really get ready for that kind of job? That's probably the bigger focus. And then I'll give you a quick view of the financial services consulting, which is what I do. So I know some of you are perhaps interested in that, so that will help you shape the thinking as well. Okay, let's then dive in. So I guess consulting, I'm not going to go through the line by line read up because I think most of you know, but fundamentally what you do is you work in a team to solve some of the most complex problems that companies face within their business. And you solve them very much for the senior management of any organization. They can be more strategic problems, they can be operational, they can be technology related problems, anything, but fundamentally that's what you're coming in. The simplest way I look at this is, companies call consultants for three reasons. One is they really have a problem that they don't know how to solve and they need some expertise. So I call that a capability problem. They don't have that. The second one is they have some idea how to solve the problem, or they might have solved it earlier as well, but they don't have the right people to solve it. I call that a capacity problem, so need help. And the third one is a combination of both. And you can apply that to any sector, any function, and fundamentally that's what you do in consulting at the simplest level in there. So I guess then types of consulting, right? So you sort of see the boxes on the left that I've drawn out. You get the classic strategy consulting, which I suppose the only type of consulting I knew when I was in JU, that based on my limited knowledge at that point. And that is a classic strategy, right? So you are sort of advising companies to improve their performance. That can be a merger and acquisition. That can be my division is making a lot of loss and I want to make it profitable. What do I do? Or I want to launch a new kind of cooking oil in India. What do I do? Those kind of problems basically in there. You're solving that. The operations problems, I think there will be something like, the supply chain problems that's coming up in the world at the moment because of geopolitical reasons. How do you solve them, as an example? You will look at that. Technology problems can be quite varied, but it can become your sort of system implementation type problems as well. So a lot of my friends who are in consulting in Calcutta and in India, they have heavy focus in technology consulting. So they work on SAP as an example. They work on cloud as an example. They work on cybersecurity as an example. And that's the heavy technology consulting part. You do that. The people and culture, less so in India, but probably more so in the Western world, you see that. It comes on back of the strategy and operations is how do you get the people in the journey? Because you can have the best strategy, but if you don't get the people aligned to it, it's just a complete mess, basically. So how do you get the people and the culture change within the organization? And the final one, risk and regulatory, is what I do for our day-to-day living. That's basically a new regulation is coming in. I mean, think of some of the crypto and blockchain news you have been having in India around regulations might be coming in. If it does come in, how does crypto exchanges comply with that, as an example? Or if a bank is dealing with that, how do you comply with that? And those are the kind of consulting that you do in there effectively. The way I simplistically think about it, guys, is think of it like a matrix you probably do in your studies. So think of the top down, the y-axis basically like your various industries. You can have financial services, you can have healthcare, you can have government, you can have retail and whatnot, basically. And think of the left, right, the x-axis like your skill sets, like strategy, operations, technology, and whatnot. And it sort of is a matrix. And every consultant chooses a matrix, chooses a point in that matrix. So either they go deep in technology. So I have friends who do SAP consulting, but they do across multiple industries. They're very deep in that. And I have friends in strategy consulting who really focus on strategy and do it across the industries. Whereas I have friends who do consulting in healthcare. I mean, they're doctors, they got a medical background, that's why they do that. but they're deep within healthcare and they cut across strategy, operations, and other areas. So it's sort of choosing a point in the matrix that is the art of consulting basically. And then you can see the type of firms in there. I mean, the strategy houses probably most of us have heard in our uni days is the usual, the McKinseys, the BCG, the Bains of the world. The big fours is what I play. You get, well, as the name says, only four, right? PwC, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG. Then you really get, and these last two are really important for you guys, I think, because the multi-service global firms, they're heavily expanding in India at the moment. So Accenture, IBM, they're heavily expanding. The likes of Mazars is heavily expanding. The last one is Alvarez and Marshall. They're heavily expanding. Things like FTI Consulting, heavily expanding in there. And then you get some boutiques, which is, Capco as an example, is very much focused on financial services, heavily expanding in India. Cantor is very much focused on sort of marketing, supply chain type questions. They're heavily expanding as well. So that's sort of the world that you get into in there. And then I guess then question becomes, well, how do I get into this? What skills do I need? What can I do in my university to get ready for this thing? So if you look at consulting, fundamentally what I said at the start, you're solving complex problems, working in teams for senior management. If you translate that into what skills you need problem-solving skills in there. And what you can do, if for those of you who are from the engineering or science background, you can very easily demonstrate that through your coursework. Because if you are doing experiments, if you're doing lab work, you're effectively solving an hypothesis, making a hypothesis and solving that. That's very easy to demonstrate in there, the problem-solving skill sets, basically. That's what you look at. You will be presenting your consulting findings to senior management, your internal team. So there is a communication skills in there, so written and verbal presentation skills. And that was actually my own biggest weakness when I was doing my engineering, because I never was a great public speaker or anything like that, basically. So I had to really work on this thing in there. And the way I did this is I took up courses when I was in university to improve my, frankly, English skills, both written and verbal in there. And I practiced presentations to my friends on different topics, basically, to improve those communication skills, because they're really important in there. You are working in a team in every consulting, so you need to build your team working skill sets. And again, I used to organize the fests at the university, right? I was actually in the second campus in Salt Lake. So when I used to organize those things, that actually built my team working skill sets. I never realized at that point, but hindsight, it did build my skill sets in team working around that. You got to have what I call people management. Simply think about the ability to work with people, basically, because again, you're working with teams, sometimes they're global. So again, all those university events, I mean, things like these that you guys are doing here in the FinClub is a classic example of all the leadership skills and the team skills that you need to do. And the final one is sector or functional expertise. I suppose that will be a little less relevant to you as you start to build your career in consulting, but over time, people tend to think of the matrix again. One of those verticals, like I'm a technology specialist, I'm an operations specialist, or I become a sector, like an industry specialist. You don't need that right now to get in, I suppose, but start thinking about it. If you're really passionate, like, I don't know, some of you might be really passionate about data science, as an example, because it's such a hot topic in the market. So, you can then start looking for and applying for roles which are around data science, as an example. So have a think about that perspective, is what skills do you want to build? So the point is, the key skills you need are sort of teamwork, leadership, problem solving, communication skills, and you can do pretty much all of that through your university, either your coursework or through your extracurricular in there. That's the view. And then I've just tried to show a bit of a model at the bottom of the slide where you can get in. Typically, I'd expect most of you to join as what firms would call as an analyst. So 0 to 2 years of experience, and then you sort of scale up the career from there. Basically, is how you do. The grades different companies call them different grades, but that's sort of the trajectory that you would get basically in there. So guys, let me just stop there and see if there are questions I can take at this stage, basically, because I've talked through quite a bit, basically.
So, sir, there was a question that popped up recently that was asked by Harsh Shaw. What are the necessary skill sets looked for in a candidate to thrive and get a consulting job?
Yeah, I mean, some of them I touched on, Aritra, as I said. I mean, so your skills you need are things like your leadership skill sets, your team working skill sets, and your problem solving skill sets. Basically, those are the most prominent ones that you can demonstrate. Now, this might be a slightly biased statement, but let me put it out anyway because this is coming from my personal experience. So, from you, the folks who are from a science or engineering background, your left brain will work very well because you're natural problem solvers, right? You guys have got high ranks in JE and whatnot, basically. So that's the same challenge I had. My left brain worked very well. My right brain did not work very well, which is the reason I did my MBA, basically. Is it didn't work very well. I was not good in presentations. I was not very good in working with people, and not that I was a disaster, but that was not my strength, basically. So you got to sort of analyze yourself and go, okay, if my key skills are teamwork, leadership, problem solving, communication skill sets, working with people, those kind of topics, how do I build them, basically, is the point in there. Some of them will come through your coursework, and some you have to do external courses. So what I used to do, I mean, I was an instrumentation engineer, right? What the hell did I know about the world of business? So I just used to read the Economic Times for the last 2 years of my coursework in JU. And it didn't make me a guru in any sense, but at least I could talk about a few things. And I think that's important, guys, because when people join consulting, people who are successful generally are curious. They generally absorb a lot of information. They like to do that. And they also have a point of view and perspective about these things, basically. Not that it's right or wrong, but they actually have a perspective. So start building those skill sets in there. Because if you go to a consulting interview, they'll ask you, well, what do you think India is doing about climate change? And do you think it's right? Well, you've got to know what India is doing and got to have a perspective on that, basically. And they're not trying to catch you out by saying it's right or wrong. They're just trying to understand, does this person has a perspective on things? Can I actually talk to this person? That's sort of the skill sets you need to build. It's a combination of hard and soft, basically. So I know some of my friends, not from JU, another college, they studied liberal arts. They're English graduates, and they've gone into strategy consulting, basically. Now, strategy consulting, when you think about it, it's extremely problem-solving, data-driven kind of work. And you go, well, how did it happen? Because what they did is they build their problem-solving skill sets in a different way. That can be doing a puzzle, that can be doing a Sudoku. Not that they can solve differential equations like I can do, but the problem is to build some fundamental skill sets. So think of those 4 and 5 skill sets, map yourself to say, I'm really good at this thing because of my academics or background. This is what I need to build something, and how do you do that? That's what I would suggest.
Okay, sir. And also there is this very common question that pops up in every undergraduate's mind who is actually aspiring to be a consultant. That is, MBA really necessary to be a good consultant?
It's $1 million question, my friends. I think there are multiple dimensions to it. There are a couple of reasons people do MBAs. So one reason is why I did it, as an example, is my right brain did not work, basically. I needed to understand that. And it just helps you, it forces you, it trains you. It builds certain skills in your strategy, operations, people management, and it's really helpful to do that. The other powerful thing of doing an MBA is it builds a network, massive, massive network across the globe, particularly if you do that in an European or a US school, because that's how they thrive, basically. So those two are some of the reasons why people do the MBAs. The second reason people do the MBAs, if you get into a sort of the strategy houses, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, LEKs of the world, They do recruit from undergraduate, and you can thrive there as undergraduate, but you will find very few senior management people there who are undergraduates. So almost it is an unwritten standard that you will have an MBA from a top tier business school to be successful in those organizations. So if someone has an aspiration around getting into a strategy house and getting to the topmost level of those organizations, the most prudent action would be to consider an MBA. Basically, that's the reason. So, but if you get into sort of a big four organization or other boutiques, you really don't need that unless you want to build some skill sets, basically. So, Aritra, to answer your question, the short answer is broad, no. You can really be successful without that. But the question you need to answer is why do you want to do the MBA? Train something in your capabilities, build your network, or you're shooting for a strat house, which basically just needs an MBA as an entry criteria. So that's the question.
Okay, so another question is that we have few computer science and undergraduates in the session as well. So most of them actually targets that software development engineering roles.
Yep.
So now the question is that many of them are actually confused, like they're in their first years. So
Yep.
so the question is that should they be considering consulting as an option for them, coming from a computer science background?
You should. Why not? I mean, I did my instrumentation in electronics. I mean, not vastly different from computer science skill sets, right? Okay, I design the circuits, you guys write the code. I get it, but it's not vastly different. So I think you should. But I guess the question I'll ask you guys to ponder, particularly the folks who are in the first year and second year, right? Because your placements haven't really started, is why do you want to do consulting in the first place? Because if you think of consulting, what you're doing, as I said, you're solving some complex problems and blah, blah. But you can solve complex problems by designing a chip as well. I've got friends who work in Intel from my classmates, nowhere close to consulting. And I'm pretty sure the work they do needs more IQ than the work that I do, basically. So if you really want to solve complex problems, there is a different way of doing it. But there is something about consulting career that's different, and that attracts certain people. So here are the differences. None of your day jobs will be similar. So you might wake up in the morning thinking that I'm going to solve problem ABC for a client XYZ, and suddenly you get an email from another client, and you got to solve two problems in a single day, do a different kind of time management. And people who get a bit of an excitement and adrenaline rush to solve high pressure problems in a diverse environment thrive in consulting. So really look into your personality and understand, do you like that? Or do you really like to sit down and do a circuit design? Equally important, equally complex, but different nature of complexity. The second one, think about, really question yourself, the point that I said about building perspectives. Do I really like to read about topics that no one really has a good answer, build a perspective, a point of view, and have a good debate discussion with anyone, might be your friends, basically, because that's what you'll be doing with your clients. Clients will ask you questions that they don't have the answers, and you've got to have a perspective. And if you're really uncomfortable doing it, if you don't like doing it, probably consulting is not for you. There is something else in there. The third thing is, consulting is, at the end of the day, an extremely people's business. Now, I wasn't one of them, but I always wanted to be one of them. So do you want to be one of them and build that network and personality and sort of you're a people's person. Not to say it's extrovert. That's very, very different. I have lots of friends who are introverts and extremely successful consultant. But the point I'm trying to make is, can you actually understand people and get along with them and really thrive in that kind of environment and do that? I've got friends, my classmates, they've done PhD from I think they went to, one of them currently is a researcher at MIT, and she went to Illinois to do her PhD. The work that she does is way more IQ demanding than what I do, but it's a different style, basically, right? She probably doesn't like to work in a massive team, which I like to do. I like to run global teams of 50 people. She wouldn't want to do that, basically, is the point. So you should aim to go for consulting, but the point is, don't look at it just as I need a job, because if you want to look at it that way, it will probably not be very useful. Think about the qualities that consultants need, and really think about, do I have them or do I want to build them, and then go with that. It's a very long answer to your question, guys, but does it help? If not, please shout.
answer surely helps because we are in our very early age of our career. Means I'm currently in my third year, so we'll be moving final semester of third year. So we'll be moving to this careeristic thing in a few months or a year, basically. So these answers will really help me to choose my profession in the long run.
Yeah, do that. I mean, there is a reason I left Infosys, right? I've got friends who've been in Infosys for, well, pretty much through their career. The reason I sort of left it, it's a fantastic organization, don't get me wrong, but I want to do different kind of things in there. I wanted to work in more global context, more complex problems, get deeper into a business context and not being a technology professional. So there are reasons I left it. And there are reasons I left Morgan Stanley because I wanted to stay in the industry, but solve different kind of problems, which I can't do in an investment bank, basically. So think long and hard about what do you want to do actually in there. Map it to your interest, your skills, and then make your career decisions. That's what I would suggest.
Sure, sir. So, sir, we can move on to the presentation again.
Okay, cool. Let me try to share my screen again and hope it works again. Okay. You see my screen again?
Yes, sir, if you can see it.
Okay, cool. All right. So I've got only one more slide for you guys, which is I want to talk to you a bit about the financial services consulting and what the hell does it mean and what does it involve. So, I mean, this is clearly an industry focus, which is what I play. And if you look at the entities that generally participate, you get to your various kind of banks, which is the first three cells in my picture. Then you get the insurance companies, and then you get the asset managers, and the final row in there. So let's just take one of them by one. So corporate retail banks, I mean, frankly, it's like, I mean, I got an account with HDFC, so just classic example of them. You do get corporate banks who provide similar services for conducting their businesses, like Standard Chartered is really big in India in that space. So that's a good example of that. You get the central banks, goes without saying, the RBI and their Bank of England, the UK, and those kind of things, the central banks. And the final one where I play is around the investment banks. So that's why Trump would call it capital markets as well. And there, because they fundamentally help organizations raise capital, trading of securities, and so on. So I mean, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, the three biggest US basically, and it's expanding. This sector is heavily expanding in India at the moment. Then you get the insurance companies, as the name suggests, is insurance, life insurance, health insurance, car insurance, so on. I mean, AIG, MetLife, and Reliance has got a few in India these days, so that kind of that. And the final one you get is asset managers. So these are where we can invest our own money, and they would manage my money to grow it for me at a fees, basically. So, I mean, those three exist in India: BlackRock, Vanguard, and Fidelity. They all exist. I've got friends in a couple of them in Bangalore who work there. So they work as well. And the last one is a market infrastructure. So they sort of provide, when you're trading in securities, there is a bit of a plumbing, as I call it, needs to happen so that the records are maintained and the infrastructure happens. Again, in the stock exchange is a good example, the PSE. You get the likes of State Street, BNI Mellon. They're all, again, in India, Northern Trust as well. BNP Paribas, the French bank, heavily based out of Mumbai, as an example. And that's what they do. Now, so that's a very sector view of financial services consulting, the kind of entities that you can service. But again, going back to my matrix, this is basically one of those horizontal lines in the matrix. And the verticals can be your, you can solve strategy problems for investment banks, you can solve ops, you can solve risk and regulatory, you can solve a technology problem for an investment bank. So it just depends on what's the problem you're solving, basically. So this is a very sector view of the world. But this is an extremely hot sector at the moment in India. All these entities are heavily expanding into India at the moment. And they're not just doing grunt work in India. They're solving some really complex problems out of their offices. I mean, Mumbai has got lots of offices. Bangalore has got lots of offices. Delhi is expanding as well. So it's a really hot and interesting area to get into and frankly solve some of the most complex problems that you can encounter in this industry. So that's a bit of a bird's eye view of the industry. But that's the last slide that I have, guys. I'll pause here again and happy to take any questions.
There's a question regarding if someone is in his third year or fourth year, should he or she go for CAT or like wait for 3 or 4 years of job experience, then go for like CAT exam or like that, or like go for some international exam like GMAT, which like covers almost all the top universities in the world, and like go with some relevant job experience and like.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I did give my CAT, guys. I had an option to go to one of the IMs, and I didn't go, basically, which people think I'm mad, basically, at that point in there. But I'll tell you my reason why I didn't do it, basically, and what I got out of it. It's personal perspective. So the challenge I see in going from straight UG to MBAs, don't get this wrong, guys, but you have no clue what the hell you're trying to do, basically. It's a very traditional way of, I've done my engineering, and I know there is more than engineering in this group, but I'm just sticking with that. I've done my engineering. You guys are the smartest in the state, basically. And let's just crack another very tough exam. It gives me another 2 years of my life to figure out what the hell do I want to do. That's basically the concept, right? That's exactly what I had in my head, basically. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just wrote my CAT and I cracked it, basically, is the point in there. But you will end up with the same problem, that you will have a very functional view of the world in there, and you won't have that broader perspective that people need to have to be successful in a consulting career in there. So my personal view is work for a few years. You get to try out a few things, right, in real life, basically. And you get a practical view of what you like and what you don't like. And from there on, go and do an MBA if you want to, right? I mean, I got admission into Indian institutes as well when I was going for MBA after 5 years of working, and I got into European, US, and Asian schools as well. The reason I came out of India is it gives you a broader perspective, and you start to build a global network that is extremely powerful. The Indian education, the management education is still very functional in some sense in there, whereas the UK one in particular is much more horizontal. It builds a broader set of management skill sets, and then you can expand from there. The ethos are different, basically, in there. So think about what you're trying to do with your career. If you want to get a bit of a pragmatic experience, figure out for a few years what you like, what you don't like, and then go for an MBA. Do it. You can do it from India. You can do it from other countries using GMAT. That's not a problem. But if you really know what you want to do, so I want to do product management, let's say, in there. It's a very hot topic. I mean, Facebook, Google, and all those guys hire product managers in India. If you really want to do that, go and do a product management from, I don't know, SPGen, basically, right? So that's the view, basically. So they're both equally powerful. My personal perspective would be spend a few years working, figure out what you want to do with your life, and then go for an MBA if you want to. And there, that's my view.
So there is another question that if we are from the economics background, can we go for like consulting and other like similar field? Like, mainly it would be like more of an analyst job at the beginning, I feel, after a bachelor's or something. Even
Yeah,
master's.
someone from economics background, did you say, Vishal?
Yes, I'm from economics background.
All
Like,
right, you are. Okay. Right. Yeah, you should. Absolutely. There is a division in most Indian consulting companies now, and actually abroad as well. It's basically called economic consulting. You should go for it. So the skills that most economic students build is around your econometric modeling, your macro analysis, and all those topics. They are becoming more and more important in India, and just extremely important in the Western world. So you should absolutely go for it. The strength generally economic students have is your business knowledge and skills tend to be at a higher level, frankly, than what I had in my final year of engineering, basically, in there. So that's that's your weapon. So yeah, you should go for that one if you want to get into consulting. There are lots of economic consulting divisions in the big fours. Lot of the McKinsey, Bain, BCGs of the world, they bring in economics graduates and take them to a training program. They would probably need an MBA to progress in the organization, but that's a back story. There are some specialist consultings like FTI Consulting as an example, who hire economics graduates for economic consulting as well. So yeah, absolutely, you should consider consulting as a career path, but don't forget the first principles that I mentioned. Is it really for you, the consulting? Think about that as well. Okay. Other questions, guys?
So regarding, there has been increase in the social impact consulting part in India, like maybe the Satwa or the like Samagra, the governance, which like they provide like business consulting and all, like 180-degree consulting, which like is mainly in colleges. They provide like some consulting to like NGOs and small startups.
Yes.
What do you think about like that? Like it's a good start for being a consultant, or like we should go mainly towards more towards Big Four or like MBB for like internship opportunities first, then transition into social consulting.
No, you can. I mean, when I was doing my MBA, I actually did pro bono consulting for social organizations. I did pro bono for startup organizations as well, because I didn't come from a consulting background, right? I was a technology person doing something in investment bank. I had no consulting background. So I had to show in my CV that I can really apply those skill sets into a consulting background. And frankly, not the easy way, but the pragmatic way of doing it was doing some pro bono consulting for startup, for social organizations, for NGOs. So absolutely, you should consider that if you get the opportunity. You should also look at things like internship and work experience. I mean, mine was unpaid in the UK, but I still did it. Frankly, it just helps my bio, right? Even if it is for a month or so, it just gives you the skill sets. You can test those, you can learn more. So yeah, the short answer is yes, you should look for that. um, I'm not sure if that can give you a whole career path in India. Sorry, I'm not heavily connected with that consulting route in India, but as a mechanism of building skill sets and experimenting, do it. Absolutely, it cannot harm.
So there is another question in the chat that how much does consulting help someone in entrepreneurship and going some from transitioning from like consulting into entrepreneurship and such a similar field?
Yeah, you can actually, because if you think about entrepreneurship at the end of the day, and if you ignore the capital raising part for the moment, then the skill sets that you need are formulating a strategy. How do you run the operations of an organization? What technology do I need? I need to hire the smart people, because you will not have all the answers as an entrepreneur, but you need to hire smart cookies who can give the answer for you. So people management. So all those skill sets that you build are equally transferable to an entrepreneurship scenario. The other thing to bear in mind, guys, is if you look at consulting at senior levels, director, partner roles, it is by and large a sales role, basically, which means that I run my own P&L. I'm responsible for that, and no one tells me how to do it. I have a target. I have to achieve that using my entrepreneurial skills to source business and deliver them. That is an extremely entrepreneurial skill set. And that's one of the things you should highlight in your bio as well. Not that you deliver a multi-million-dollar business, but you solve the problem on your own, identifying it and those kind of things, which shows the entrepreneurial mindset, the skill set. So the short answer to that question is yes, it does build the skill sets to switch to an entrepreneurial role. It also gives you the heavy network with extremely senior people in organizations. And that again can help in your entrepreneurial journey, whether that's capital raising, whether that's sort of entrepreneurial coaching and introductions and all those good topics. So yeah, it can absolutely help you in that as an exit opportunity.
So there's no more questions. So we can get back to the presentation, I guess.
I don't have any more slides, guys. I kept slides very few because I wanted to talk to you guys and try to solve your questions, put it that way.
Okay, sir. So there was this one question that one of our juniors have asked that many of us basically, as you said, that an idea of the industry is very much important before proceeding towards MBA. So if someone is
Hmm.
actually coming from that industrial engineering background,
Mm-hmm.
will it be very much means helpful for them to dive into the consulting world uh, just right after undergraduate?
It can. I guess the point to understand is it doesn't matter what engineering you have done. Your degree is almost, it's not irrelevant, but it's less sort of consequential to your consulting journey. Because if I think of my career, I'm not trying to solve them. I'm not trying to solve a circuit design problem. I'm not trying to solve an industrial design problem. I'm not trying to solve a mechanical engineering problem there. What I'm trying to solve are business problems which needs a fair bit of parallel tangible skill sets around it. So your industrial engineering again will gives you the core skill sets that you can solve. Now, one other thing to bear in mind, and I didn't touch on this, guys, there are some very specific consulting organizations which focuses on engineering skill sets. So Matt McDonald, as an example, has got it in India. Arub Consulting in India has got it as well. So they actually hire engineering people for their engineering skill sets and put them in consultancy roles. So if someone is really passionate about using the the core skill sets in engineering into a consulting organization, you can look at those type of companies as well, basically. But if someone is looking to right, I've built my sort of core problem solving and all those skill sets, I want to apply that to you in a different business context, look for the companies that I sort of flagged in my in the presentations, basically, to do it that way in there.
Right.
So to answer your question, after industrial engineering, yes, absolutely, you can. You can go either direction. You can specialize on something and go for a company, or you go for a more business technology consulting and go for one of the other companies. So you can.
Okay. So there is this one question we had that is the role of consultancy as a service expanding, and also how is it evolving with technological advancement?
Yeah, massively, Aritra, massively changing with technology. So I guess there are two levels of change that's coming in. Consultancy historically used to be, very travel oriented. You travel Monday to Thursday, come back to your home office on Friday, that kind of style, right? You got this picture from the Hollywood movies of a jet-setting person that is flying across the world. That's pretty much gone these days because of COVID. So it's all very hybrid working right now and is heavily dependent on technology. So that's a massive technology impact on your day-to-day consulting life. The second one, I guess the more interesting for many of you in this call is most of these big companies are getting into the cutting edge of technology consulting. What I mean by that is artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, machine learning consulting. They're getting into those sectors as well. And they're hiring a bunch of people. They're hiring different kind of skill sets. They're hiring people from sort of science, engineering type background who got the skill sets in those areas. They're actually hiring PhDs as well, because frankly, if you want to build a blockchain, if you want to write a machine learning code, you need a little bit more knowledge than probably you get in a UG degree, put it that way. So they're hiring those people as well. And they're hiring some people who has got very little knowledge about these technologies, but fundamentally business problem solvers. So someone like, if you're using AI in healthcare, you'd probably team up someone who's a healthcare specialist with a very smart AI specialist and solve the problem. So the point is, this is heavily changing with technology, and people who have got a very deep technology expertise are now equally attractive to consulting organizations to solving some very, very specific problems. And it's going to grow. That's the way it is.
Sure, sir. Sir, so one question from my end as well. So, sir, you have been in the consulting world for the last 15 years, if I'm not wrong, I guess.
Since 2011, after my MBA.
Okay, so 11 years.
So 10 years, 10, 11
10 or
years.
11 years. So, sir, you have seen the consulting firm, means life in a consulting firm before COVID and after COVID. So, how will you means, describe them? Like, which one was better?
Um, I think I like the world after COVID slightly. The only reason is it gives me the flexibility of more hybrid working, which helps me basically. So, and that's quite powerful for me because some days I can work from home and all my calls like this basically. Other days, maybe a day I get into London and just talk to my clients in person and solve the problem. So I think that flexibility is very important to me. I never realized it would be that important till COVID happened, but after that I got used to it. So the post-COVID consulting world is more attractive to me because it gives me the flexibility. It's more, yeah.
Okay. So another question, sir. Like we come from, like I'm from a mechanical engineering background. So it's not
Yeah.
expected. It's not quite expected from me that I will be doing hardcore coding. So do I stand a chance to be a part of any of those big fours, or like it's not possible for me to be a part of any of the strategy houses right now because I am in my undergraduate. So will it be possible for us, people like us who doesn't have that much like technical skill sets, like Python coding or R or machine learning, big data analytics and all, to be a part of this technology consultancy firm?
You can, because if I look at some of my friends, they're heavily into, a couple of them are directors in a SAP practice. I don't think SAP is taught within JU for that matter, not even in our IT department, I think. So what they got into is the way they did it is actually, well, they were my classmates at Infosys, so they went in there, they picked up the skills from SAP from there, and then they moved to one of the big fours into a consulting organization. That's one of the routes people tend to do. Is you learn the tricks of the trade from in a more technology consulting environment, if that is what you want to do, and then transition into a consulting organization. The other option, and frankly, I think it's hard given how Indian consulting companies operate, because irrespective of if you have done R, Python or not, I know your brain is smart. So it works basically to pick up those problem solving skill sets. But I don't think Indian consulting companies operate that way in that. So if you're really passionate about tech consulting and you're not from a sort of CS or IT background, the sort of more pragmatic option is probably get into a technology firm in the first instance to build some of the skill sets and then transition into consulting using that vertical knowledge base. That's what we've done in that.
So one of the questions that have popped up in this chat box is that one of our viewers is
Yep.
having an MBA from supply chain management from National Rail and Transportation Institute, Vadodara. So do he has any chance of being a part of any of the consulting corporations?
Right. Okay. How did he end up in this call? He's not a JQ student. Nevertheless. Okay. Supply chain consulting is quite hot, guys. Basically, is the point. Two reasons. I think COVID, the massive disruption to supply chain that has happened. The war that's happening at the moment, massive disruption to supply chain that is happening. And I think what's coming in is more digital supply chain consulting, or DSC as some organizations call it. So it is a supply chain consulting. I think for that particular guy or a girl, having a look at specialized supply chain consulting is the more pragmatic option, basically. Because then the skills can be applied in there. And there are companies which do that in India as well.
Okay. So Vishal, would you like to take over?
Yeah, I feel like we are at the end, like we are out of the questions mainly. And mainly the whole consulting, I feel, is more about traveling, which was usually in the 2019, like before pre-pandemic, it was all about traveling and more adventurous, more like traveling to the client location, then to back office and all. And I think that question has been answered, like in the flexible and more like hybrid model that has been taking place after the pandemic. And most of the questions are done. Most of them are repetitive. So there has been a question regarding the MIM, the Master in Management degree, which is like budding up in the European universities, like in Mannheim University, Swedish University. How do you look it as? Is it anything different than the IIMs which offer like an MBA after like you graduate or something, or it's a bit better than what IIMs can provide? Or
Yeah, I
anything?
think it's similar to doing an MBA straight after graduation. I think the subtle difference you find in masters in management, because my business school has a masters in management as well. There are two differences. Generally, the masters in management tend to have a focus in there. So what I mean is MIM in marketing, MIM in supply chain or something, or finance or something like that. It tends to have a more focus than a MBA, which is a clearly has a more broader business skill sets basically. That's one difference. And the second thing is the your cohort in there. So I think at least in my business school, the MIMs are typically 2 years, 3 years kind of experience and coming in, whereas most MBAs is definitely 5 plus, more than that. I mean, 5 plus is probably some of the bare minimum you'd find in a Western business school. So that's the real difference: is the experience of your peer group in those degrees, and the specialization that you can go for. So it tends to operate in a very similar organization like the straight after uni MBAs in India. The difference big is those two, and plus you get exposure to an Western education environment, which generally gives you more flexibility in what you want to do. It gets you sort of the usual cultural exposure and everything else, and an opportunity to work in those countries. Basically, that's the difference. In that. Cool. Any other questions, guys?
Ritu, is there any other question not similar to like previous questions which have been asked? Most of the questions.
I don't think there are any questions that have not been addressed yet. So sir, it was very nice talking to you.
Pleasure, guys.
And we would like to say that okay, so I think Shomadip would be presenting the last slide for us.
Um, Hello. Before we drop off, I have one question. For working professional, what would you suggest to like executive MBA, part-time MBAs, remote MBAs, or like just take a break and do the full-time MBA?
It's the $1 million question, Mike, and I don't think there's a straight answer to it. Basically, so think of why do people do executive MBA versus full-time MBA or the part-time MBA, basically. So generally, people who are in a managerial position and want to get more business managerial skill sets to progress within the same industry or function tend to go for exec MBA, and that's at least in the Western world. You tend to see that. And the part-time MBA generally tends to work well with people who've got quite a high experience. So, something like 10 plus, basically, because of the first reason that I mentioned in there. People who tend to have some experience, like I had about 5 years when I left my job to do full-time, but you are looking to do a transition to a different industry or a different function. So I went from financial services industry to financial services consulting, as an example. That tends to work well with a full-time MBA because it gives you the opportunity a little bit stress-free time box to pick up the skills, build the right network, and make the transition. So it sort of comes back, Monica, to what are you trying to do basically in there. That would be my perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Sinchan.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, I had one question. Say, for example, I go to a consulting job after my undergraduate, and I find that it doesn't appeal to me much, and can I switch back to a core job again if I want of my own field.
There's nothing impossible in this world, Trishan. So I'm sure you can, but the question that I think you have to navigate is why and how. So what I mean by that is, if you went into like a technology consulting in a big four, and then you want to go back to Microsoft to do that, it's a big challenge, basically, right? Because there'll be a huge explanation to do in there. And that's the reason I suggested think long and hard. Is consulting right for you? Is that what you want to do? Anchor it to the style, the skill sets that you need to be successful in there. So it's not impossible, Prashant, particularly if you are in the early days of your consulting career, but it's tricky. Consultants always move the industry. That's not a difficult point here. But the point is, if you get into a consulting job and move to the core job. So I'll give you an example. If I want to quit consulting now and I want to go and work in an investment bank, I think I'm pretty welcome actually in there. But if I want to quit that and go back to my instrumentation engineering related jobs, I'm pretty sure I'll be jobless, basically. So think about long and hard what you want to do. If you don't think consulting is for you after you join it, exit pretty quickly would be my suggestion. So you have a much better chance of getting back to your core studies, basically. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
So we're really short of time now. So
Okay.
we would like to wrap up by saying it was a wonderful session, and we as FinClub JU take great pride in announcing that within the first few months of its inception, we have grown to become the largest financial markets-oriented club in the university, dedicated to spreading financial awareness and promoting interest in the world of finance within the student community. FinClub JU endeavors to be a platform for enhancing knowledge on everything that is finance. So yeah.
Very good. Well, excellent. Thank you guys for having me. I have a reflect, ponder thought on what we talked through. If you guys want to have another session and just do a bit more of a Q&A, let me know. Happy to find some time in diaries. But otherwise, guys, all the best. Have fun exploring the world of consulting. And if you do join consulting, maybe I'll see you some of in my organization at some point.
Yes,
all the
sir.
best, guys.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.